start as the lead of the COG, which is our emergency response in Europe. Of course, Yuji Takasu has been also deeply involved, being responsible for the facilities in the headquarters compound. The General has tasked me to lead a review team to go through the lessons learned from these recent events, to see how our systems, our protocols, our procedures have worked in order to address the many challenges that we have to face. And of course, in those cases where we may find that there are need for adjustments, to put in place those adjustments looking towards the future. I think all in all, and I don't want to go myself into the details because my colleagues here are the ones who have really handled those details. I was away, I was in Geneva, so I arrived this morning at 3 a.m. I will not take any credit for the good work that was led by my colleagues, but I think what we have to really recognize that as the situation is today on Thursday, that the headquarters compound was operational already yesterday, with the Security Council having its first meeting yesterday afternoon in the North Lawn building. In the meantime, Monday and Tuesday, the people who were required to be working here to do maintenance, assessment, and to really try and bring back what was required were also on the ground. We took some decisions, particularly yesterday, on the full operation of the compound based on the safety and security of staff, because there was a need to really work on some aspects, particularly of safety. And after that, the assessment was made for us to bring back staff to the extent possible today, and that's what you see taking place. It is very important to recognize particularly the many staff that have been working tirelessly in the past few days, who have been not only addressing the very difficult tasks that were before us due to the storm, but also having to handle their own personal situations, as many of our staff have been impacted. I don't want to take more time now. I would like to hear from colleagues and to give you a more detailed briefing, and then, as Eduardo has indicated, to get your questions. So may I start asking Greg to brief? Thank you.
Thank you, Susana. Again, our hearts go out to all the people affected by this crisis. As Susana said, it's not just our employees, it's employees of the member state permanent missions that are here, and it's the citizens and residents of the United States that have been affected very greatly, particularly in New Jersey and Connecticut and New York. And then we also are acutely aware that we have problems all the way down into the Caribbean, and the UN is mobilizing to work on those issues as well. If I can stick primarily to the New York side of this, Sunday evening, we were becoming more acutely aware that we were going to face a very large and critical incident with the arrival of Hurricane Sandy. We had been in touch with the Office of Emergency Management all through the weekend. We were looking closely at how this was going to affect the United Nations. On Sunday evening, the Crisis Operations Group senior members and myself made a decision in line with recommendations from New York City and the Office of Emergency Management and many others that we were not going to operate on Monday. This was in large part due to the preparations that were underway. Transportation was being shut down. We were being told that people needed to be in place by early Monday afternoon, where they were going to stay and not moving around. So we made the decision on Sunday night that we were going to close on Monday, and we transmitted that decision to our employees and our member states through our normal emergency means, which is a combination of internet and emails and electronic communications. On Monday, we looked closely at the situation and we saw it worsening. We were also participating in the OEM conferences, conference calls that were going on. We knew that it was going to get even worse. We made the decision on Monday that we were not going to open on Tuesday. At that point, as many of you recall, the hurricane was scheduled to arrive really in force in New York Monday evening and go through Tuesday. So on Monday, we made the call for Tuesday. We used the same electronic medium to notify our staffs, notify the permanent missions, notify everybody that we could that we were responsible for, that the United Nations would also not open on Tuesday. Tuesday morning, when we awoke and several of us got into the United Nations, despite the continuing of the rain and things like that, we started our first Crisis Operations Group meeting in the United Nations to assess the damage to the United Nations. As you are aware, we have a responsibility not just for the Secretariat, but in terms of coordinating worldwide operations in many cases. Our job is to get the Secretariat moving again, to make sure that the Security Council can meet, get the General Assembly moving as fast as possible, support our agencies, funds, and programs, and ensure that to the maximum extent possible, our New York operation is capable of supporting all the things that the UN does around the world. Tuesday morning, it became evident that we had suffered pretty major damage in the United Nations. In a nutshell, I'll tell you that the storm surge, which was higher than anybody predicted, came over the FDR Drive, came into the service drive at the 3B level of the United Nations, rose above our loading dock levels of the 3B, and then started plummeting down into the lower levels of the United Nations. This caused electrical problems. This caused our chillers to have to be taken offline. When our chillers were taken offline, we lost some communications capabilities. We proceeded to go into backup mode for communications over to our secondary site in New Jersey. We were doing multiple things at the same time. We were trying to figure out what our capabilities were in terms of restarting, but it became evident on Tuesday with the first round of damage assessments that we were highly unlikely to really be able to go back to full operations on Wednesday. Part of our problem was it was very difficult to get that message out because our communications were severely disrupted at that point. We did our best to inform our employees. There are other networks that were being used, private networks. There was some ability to put things on certain websites. Our own website was compromised, and we really could not make changes to it. Emails were barely functioning at that point and really didn't start functioning until Tuesday night, Wednesday morning at about midnight, and even then with very limited capability. Despite these challenges, we made assessments, and we had to look at things like the flooding in the basement. Those of you that are looking closely at the CMP project know that we have a plastic sheath over the top of the General Assembly building. That was torn off. The front entrance to the General Assembly building was damaged, and we had to address those things. By Wednesday, we were planning to go back into more or less semi-normal operations on Thursday. By Wednesday, we understood that the Security Council also had to have a meeting. We facilitated a Security Council meeting, not in its normal chamber, but in another room on the North Lawn. I know that some reports that we had to move the Security Council off the campus. That is not true. The Security Council met in the North Lawn building of the UN campus. We facilitated that meeting. And we were in touch with many of our committees, with the President of the General Assembly, with members of the COG, and a set of meetings were scheduled today that included meetings in the General Assembly Hall and quite a few scheduled meetings in the North Lawn building. We also have operations back in the Secretariat, in this building, Dag Hammarskjöld Library as well. We are not back to full operations, but given the fact that this hurricane ended on Tuesday morning, I think we made some remarkable efforts to get back in operation for the Security Council on Wednesday and to have the amount of operations that we have today. We clearly have some difficulties in terms of our communication systems. We need to look closely at that, and as Susanna said, she will be leading a group to look at how we can make things better and do things better in the future on that end, and overall look at how we responded to this. but I will tell you that I'm exceptionally proud of the people that stayed through this entire operation, whether it was our security people, whether it was our facilities maintenance people, whether it was our contractors providing food, it was our IT people. The people that stayed and make this place run, in many ways, just did an incredible job to get us where we are today. And I want to thank them particularly for their services. Many of them have not been home to their families. Many of them suffered some of the same things that many people did. And yet, because they knew that we have a larger global mission, they stayed and worked and did their best to get us online as fast as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Let me ask